All right. Hi, and welcome everybody to New Earth Consciousness. Tania here with Chelsea. Uh, I'm gonna, how do you pronounce your last name?
Goucher.
Goucher. It's too funny.
Goucher,
This is the
yes.
second time this has happened. I'm having a guest, and I'm like, we're going on a first name basis, and I realize, wait, I got to say her last name too. Is it Goucher? I don't know. Goucher. Thank you. Awesome. So Chelsea's here with us. Her website is Awakening Chandra, CHANDRA.com, means moon in Sanskrit. And so, yeah, I'm excited to have Chelsea on as a guest. We're going to talk about her own journey and also the work that she does, which is deeply rooted in somatics and psychedelics, correct? And
Correct.
yeah, welcome to the channel.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and always excited for any opportunity to talk about where I've been and where I'm going, hopefully where a lot of us are going,
Yeah,
bringing in kind of a new era. So, yeah, just glad to be here and happy
yeah,
to share.
yeah, definitely. So in your own personal journey, like you've had your own personal struggles with addiction and anxiety, and so yeah, maybe share with us like what that was. How did you find yourself in this work?
Yeah, so it kind of happened. I mean, there's a couple different like threads to pull on to kind of weave together to kind of bring the whole story into perspective. But what like initially catalyzed kind of my personal growth, like turn spiritual awakening journey was really just like my Saturn return. I was coming up on my 30th birthday, which is now, almost a decade ago. I was coming up on my 30th birthday and was going through I think what a lot of people do when they kind of start to face like mortality a little bit more.
Yeah. So
And
maybe let me
I,
pause you for a second, because some people might not know what a Saturn return is. Now, I know a
okay,
lot
yeah.
of people with, astrology, whatever, like I didn't know what it meant, but yeah, maybe explain real briefly what that is.
Yeah. So a
Anybody?
Saturn return is like a pretty astrologically significant event for most people in their lives because basically what it represents is the time when Saturn transits back through where it was at the moment of your birth. So everyone has like a birth chart, which is like a snapshot of where all of the luminary bodies are in the sky at the moment you're born. And so the Saturn return around your 30th birthday usually represents the time it's taken for Saturn to come all the way back around to where it was on your birth chart at that time. And then people, if they're lucky, hopefully get to go through another Saturn return or two as their lives go on. And so, because Saturn astrologically and mythologically and archetypally is like associated with limitations and constriction and boundaries and time, the Saturn return often has that flavor
Kind of like
of
rough lessons, isn't it?
information that,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like having to
yeah,
go through some real rough lessons just to like fully like ground on earth, right? Like it's kind of,
yes,
yeah, kind of
totally.
that kind of
That's well said.
awakening. Yeah.
That's well said. And I think, I did feel that very personally. And, astrology was kind of like my first little window into like spirituality. And I was coming up on my 30th birthday and starting to feel that weight of like, okay, I'm not just like in my 20s anymore. I can't just kind of like float along through life, just like having fun. And,
Right.
um, I started to kind of realize that I wasn't living with a lot of intention, and I also started to realize that there was some things I wanted to do to like improve my health, my physical health. And so it was kind of like following those two lines of inquiry led me into this like whole awakening of my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual health. And so what started off as kind of this like, I want to get healthy before I turn 30 and I kind of want to figure out what I'm doing with my life, turned into a full blown like total redirection of where I was going and like my sense of purpose, which I didn't really have at all before. But it also helped me make sense of some of the things that had happened in my past, that you alluded to, things with like addiction, just feeling very anxious, experiences I'd had with abusive relationships, with some really like dark situations around my sexuality, things of that nature. And this whole awakening process both gave me a path to follow forward in life and also gave me a lot of answers about where I've been that helped me make a lot of sense of myself, and that also helped me see myself in so many other people and get turned on to this idea of like, I want to help other people that are going through like a similar time of like kind of being in between, kind of not being sure, and needing some guidance on like how to give themselves permission to open up and start to see things from maybe a different perspective than how they've been raised or how, the conversation have been in the world around them.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you you like feel like a lot of women, you were in the world of corporate, were you not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what I see happening with a lot of women in corporate is they burn out. Like they get to this point where they're just like done. They're just like, this is not for me. I've reached my limit. I can't take this anymore. I hate this. And I'm curious, like what was your realization personally with your relationship with being involved in corporate? I'm guessing you were making good money, but something was left unfulfilled.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of again ties into like that feeling of like, what am I like kind of like waking up in the middle of a dream and being like, oh, what is actually going on here? What am I actually doing with my life? And that was very much my experience in corporate. So I have like a sales background. I done sales and a couple of different like jobs and different permutations. And then I landed a corporate sales job for a shipping company. So ocean shipping, cargo containers, very male dominated industry. And I worked primarily with men. And on the one hand, I'd always prided myself in like thriving in that environment because like I'm very comfortable there and can like do that very well. But there was definitely a lack of feeling A, actually valued for what I could bring to the table,
Mhm.
and B, that I was like using any of my actual intelligence or skills in a way that truly like aligned with what I felt like I was supposed to be doing here in this lifetime. And so I was making good money. My bosses were happy with me. I enjoyed my coworkers. There was nothing like inherently
Mm,
bad about the situation, but it
right.
wasn't right for me. And I was very like numbed out inside because of that. Like I was making the good money and I was like spending it like all the time on just like fancy vacations, like going to the bar, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
eating, you know what I mean? Like I was just very like
It's kind of
hedonistic
more,
in a way,
yeah,
And again, it was like
consumeristic.
my 20s, but I had all this money. I was in my 20s and I could just like feel myself like getting sucked into this like very material lifestyle.
Hmm.
And again, it wasn't that it was necessarily like bad. Nothing in my life was like screaming at that time, like red flags, but it also just felt like such a waste. Like there was something in me that really truly felt like this is not what I'm here to do. And I'm like prostituting my mind to make someone else money. And I'm not spending any of the time like addressing the passions or the interests or the curiosities or the things that like really lived deep inside me, but that I hadn't like been able to access since I was like a kid, really, because
Mm.
I'd been so swept up in this like, performance of like what we do in the world here as humans, of like, this is what you're supposed to do. This is the job you're supposed to have. This is how your relationship is supposed to look. This is, the marker of success. That's like your next achievement. And so, I got swept up in that like very easily and very unconsciously, like I think most of us do, it's kind of like what we're taught shows that we're like a good person, right?
Oh
Or
yeah.
that we're doing well. And so I was in it, but I felt very empty inside. And I think that that contributed a lot to the things like, you know, excessively drinking. I'm certainly not an alcoholic. I've never been an alcoholic, but I have struggled with addiction with other substances. And I recognized that alcohol was something I was definitely overusing
Hmm.
because it was like the only thing that helped me to really feel connected
Mm-hmm.
in the way that I wanted to, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, corporate life, it was not for me. And when I started to go through this like awakening, which really ramped up in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
it was because my company had put me on like work at home status. So like you're salespeople, you're out in the field. Like if anyone's going to contaminate the office, it's you, you know? So
Oh,
so we all got to work from home for like 8 months. And that like completely just like tore my world open. You know, I'd been such a hustler, like always on the go. I was involved in a ton of different like volunteer boards in my community. And
mm,
I represented my company on a lot of like in a lot of different organizations. Like it was a big corporate company for the town I lived in. And so I was able to like show up for the company in these different capacities throughout the community. So I had like a very active public life. And so 2020 happened and that all went away. And it was like I was forced to slow down so much and actually start to address these things. We're like, well, is it really just that I'm turning 30? Is it really just that I don't like my job? Is it really just that like I'm tired of going to the bar so much? And I started to like turn all these things over. And that's when it really started to become a spiritual thing for me. And I really started to become aware of like consciousness and different levels of consciousness and like how aware for myself and I think for a lot of the world that the consciousness I'm operating or was operating from was like fear based
mm,
and very reactive and very much like a response to like how the world was responding to me, you know, and like
mm,
contorting myself based on, you know, essentially these deep seated fears that had been placed in me around being accepted, you know, being validated by the tribe, being, you know what I mean, feeling safe, all of these
yeah.
things that are very real experiences and very like evolutionarily important, but that also like I think have been completely twisted and like co-opted, you know, to control people. And in some ways, maybe that's created great things in our society. And in other ways, I think it's, you know, done a lot of damage
Yeah.
to the human spirit. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was an interesting time. And so I ended up, you know, that year at the end of 2020, like quitting my job, which was really tough. They called us back into the office like very abruptly. We had just signed these contracts that were like work from home contracts, like finally, after like months of it just kind of being like this ad hoc
Mm-hmm.
setup. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, I'm going to have a work from home job now. And then there was like some corporate politics, you know, and my boss lost the battle and he was forced by the higher ups to call all of us back to the office. And I was just like, no, I want to travel. I want to feel free. I don't want to be tied down to this job that I don't have to be tied down for, except for the fact that you want that control, that like corporate control, right? And I just wasn't having it. So I quit my job at the end of 2020 and didn't really have a plan, except that
Yeah.
I wanted to help people in a genuine way beyond just selling them
Yeah.
shipping.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think, man, I think the pandemic and COVID, a lot of people
Ah,
changed their
yes.
trajectory. I mean, I know for myself, I was teaching at a preschool, which, you know, children are lovely, but I was tired of making peanuts for my income. So,
Right.
you know, it's
Yeah.
like, I think there was a lot of coming to, I don't know, coming to Jesus moment where it's like, okay, is this really what you want to be doing with your life? You know,
Yep.
what is not in alignment for you right now? And I think those things got amplified and it was just like, yeah, this is not this is not in alignment. You know, this is what I want. And so it was this opportunity. And I think a lot of people were just like, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm going to go with full faith into whatever that next level expression is. And so Yeah, so interesting. So you let go of your job
Mhm.
and and what happened next?
What happened next? Well, so I'd kind of been, again, kind of part of this whole like awakening within myself that it started maybe a couple years before COVID, but then like really got amplified in 2020 was this entrepreneurial aspect of myself was coming to the forefront. And again, this like the theme of like wanting freedom, wanting autonomy, wanting to be able to travel, wanting to be able to have control over my own life and essentially earn and make my own money, not just like collect a paycheck for doing someone else's bidding, right? And so, I dabbled in some like multi-level marketing things and things of that nature. And then right as 2020 was coming to a close, I got involved with one of my very good friends in a food business that she was opening up out of my hometown in Alaska, making like organic, wild harvested products from kelp, from sea kelp. And, that ended up becoming a whole nother side quest and lesson for me. Um, but it was kind of like what I hung my hat on is thinking it would be like my next thing after this
Mhm.
corporate experience. But quickly, I realized that business was not for me. But I had gotten myself invested in it, like financially, time wise, like heart wise.
Mhm.
Um, and in the background, while I'm doing this business and knowing it's not for me, and seeing in myself how I was like repeating this pattern of needing to latch onto something to feel validated
Mm.
on my journey,
Mhm.
I was in the background doing like trainings for intuitive coaching, for astrology, for yoga. Like I just was going full bore into like the professional personal development path and like trying to take on for myself these different tools that I could use to help myself and help other people because
Mhm.
that was like always the vision. And I just didn't quite know how to get there. I mean, I'm the same as you in the sense that, I've always wanted to make good money and to feel valued for what I bring to the table. And, walking away from the corporate life was hard because I was definitely being taken care of in that way. And so basically since 2020 then, since the end of it, I was involved in the food business. That I was able to get off my plate last year. And now for like about the last year have been fully dedicated to my coaching business. Um, and have just been trying to figure out ever since then. I mean, honestly, how to take care of myself in this new way of being and finding it, again, to be completely transparent, like
Mhm.
extremely difficult.
Mhm.
I'm in debt. I am not at all where I wanted to be, coming close to 40. I'm, if you looked at my life on paper now compared to where it was before this like awakening journey,
Mhm.
it doesn't like look good. You know what I mean? And so, and
Oh,
that's like
yeah.
that's a very, it's a very real thing. And it's also been a very interesting thing to work with
Mhm.
because so often I think that, especially, and your listeners can probably relate to this, like you get a lot of messaging from the spiritual community around how you're rewarded when you like lean into your authenticity,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And like
Maybe in certain ways, yes.
right,
In
right,
others,
right,
not.
right. And so like that's really what I'm trying to navigate. And I'm also recognizing where even that was like naive. There's like a lot of naivety in myself that I've like had to come to grips with on this journey of like just seeing where I'm outsourcing my power, seeing where, like I said, I'm latching on to someone else to validate me, or seeing where I'm looking for someone else to like take me to the next level, or
Yeah, right.
get me up the next step or whatever. And um having really everything stripped away and now being in this place where I am, where for the last year I've really just dedicated myself to like my own self understanding, my own healing, which, like I said, that's been going on now for almost a decade, but like really trying to like encapsulate it and package it and produce something that like can benefit people and that I can like receive a fair exchange for has been a really interesting experience. And I do not have it all figured out.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at now. And it certainly feels like the right path to be on. I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like I'm living my purpose. And I do believe that, this collective awakening that it's happening for a reason. I'm meant to be part of it. We're all meant to be part of it. Um,
Mhm.
but it can be hard sometimes, like in the in-between space, to like have faith in
Yeah.
where it's all leading
Yeah.
and to not get discouraged when you see money flowing to such evil things and the currency not being magnetized towards the people that are really trying to do good in the world. And that can be very confusing and disorienting. And so that's kind of like some of what I've been trying to sort through in 2025.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, it's
know?
super interesting. I mean, it's you said, well, first of all, I want to thank you for being fully transparent because I feel like there are so, social media to me is just, it is not a place for authentic expression, I don't think. I mean, maybe there are people out there that are authentically expressing themselves, but most, I will say most, we're putting up whatever, a certain face, certain thing, and hoping that people believe it. And especially in the coaching industry, I just am kind of amazed at what happens inside of that industry. I mean, it's unregulated, which that has its pluses and minuses, right? Like people are free
Right.
to do and be what they want to be and do, but at the same time, yeah, there just isn't. I feel like, Kevin Trudeau talks about this gentleman I've been listening to, and he talks about the elite and how there are two types. There's the elite that actually are for humanity. They are
Mm-hmm.
actually wanting to do good. They have a lot of money and they want to do good.
Yeah.
However, he says very point blank, they're the minority. Most of the elite class are very definitely parasitic in nature. And so, how do we, and so this awakening that I see, that what you're talking about happening, it's like, okay, we're waking up and realizing, oh my God, we've been lied to. Everything we've learned is actually not true. And, we've been dumbed down, we've been conditioned, we've been programmed, like on so many different levels,
Mm.
you know? I mean, even down to
Yeah.
the type of handwriting that we're taught, truthfully.
Yeah.
And so, when you say like, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, and I think this is what we have to remember is, the when we think of evolution, and we're like that creature that was a fish creature and it's trying to go on land, right? It's starting to
Mm-hmm.
grow legs and grow on land and it's starting to breathe air and it's like, oh my God, can I really make it on land? And I feel like
Yeah.
kind of what it's like, right? It's like, a whole new paradigm is so unfamiliar. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how it's going to shake out. But, I think it's such a beautiful thing that you're like, I am choosing to listen to my own soul and my own higher self and where I feel guided to be. And even though externally it doesn't look like the magazine worthy life or whatever,
Right.
but when we stop and think, well, what is that magazine worthy life anyway? Well, it's empty, it's an illusion. So if we're like wanting to live a life that is actually divine, is, like what does it mean to be human, really? And so it's beautiful. So I want to get into the psychedelic part of your work because
Yeah.
I find you know, psychedelics, and I am not an expert, so you're the expert here. I all I understand about, and I okay, sorry, my mind goes faster than I can speak sometimes.
I understand.
Yeah. So psychedelics rewire your brain. This much I know. And so, and I feel like, okay, there's two pathways with psychedelics. You can do like the full blown, like, okay, I'm gonna have this trip, right? Enter in
Mhm.
this different reality, different, thinning of the veils, whatever, and have this ex mind-blowing experience. Or I can do the microdosing, right? And so maybe
Mhm.
talk about like what are the differences about both? Like, do you recommend one over the other? Or are they just not comparable? Like, talk to us about that.
I mean, I I think they both like definitely have their application. And when it comes to psychedelics, what you said, it's like it really is about rewiring the brain in the sense of helping you get out of like that default mode, that way of thinking.
Hmm.
And so, a book I would recommend to anyone is called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. It's very like layman friendly because he's an investigative journalist. And so he approaches it from that standpoint. So it's very easy for anyone to understand the book. But one thing he really talks about in that book is how pretty recently the scientific community has acknowledged that there's like a set of neural pathways in the brain called the default mode network, which is kind of this feedback loop between like your cognition and your limbic system, which is like your memories, your past experiences, kind of things that are in the subconscious, but like the upper subconscious. And so, what scientists starting to postulate is that this set of neural pathways is kind of what like constructs the ego, which
Mm,
makes sense when you think about your ego, your sense of your conscious sense of self being this being that pivots between what's my next move and what have I learned from the past that's going to help me decide what this next move is, right? And so it's really easy as humans to get like stuck in that, to get stuck in like living our lives every day based on what's already happened to us.
mm,
And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like the personal frustration that I've felt, over the last several years of like trying to build my business, trying to help people, trying to like really bring it with something like authentic and powerful and feeling like I'm not making the progress I want. And then because I'm not seeing that like manifest in the physical, it's very hard to get my brain out of that loop of like, I'm failing. I
right.
must, you know what I mean? It's
Oh,
like,
yeah, yeah.
and
It goes
so
into that survival mode, right? It goes into the fear
exactly.
and like, yeah, that what's that part of the brain? The amygdala, right? Um,
Yes.
yeah, your lid
And
gets.
that's what, yeah, I mean, that's what blocks really like all manifestation on some level is a focus on like what is versus like what could be,
Right.
right? And so every time I have a bad day and I'm focusing on like how much of a failure I am or something, like that's keeping my brain in that circuit. And all of these other neural pathways that could be utilized by like my consciousness are not being utilized. And that's where all your creativity is. That's where the new idea is that maybe is going to take you to the next level. That's where you're going to remember the conversation you had with that person you were supposed to call that might be your next connection, for the next thing down the road. And so there's lots of different ways that we can shut down this like ego construct and open up the brain to receive, to be the receiver from like this deeper collective consciousness. And so you can do this through meditation. You can, I mean, there's so many different ways you can do it through a sound bath, through, binaural beats. There's so many different ways that people access this like inner wellspring.
Mm,
But one of them is psychedelics. And the reason for it is exactly like what you said. Psychedelics can help shut down those like default mode networks.
hmm.
And the analogy that he makes in his book, Michael Pollan does, is it's like, and I just think it's so good. So I keep repeating it because I don't know how else to say it better, is it's like your brain's running on the interstates all the time. And then all of a sudden the interstates are shut down and your brain has to take the back roads.
Mm.
And it literally creates new connections between your neurons because the part of your brain that's most vocal, most active is shut off. And so then the rest of it can kind of do its thing. And that can be so powerful. Again, psychedelics as a tool for healing can be so powerful, just like meditation can, just like so
Hmm.
many other things. And I don't believe that psychedelics are necessary at all for anyone's like healing or growth.
Hmm.
But I think they can be such a powerful tool because they're so effective
Right.
at forcing that shutdown. Like meditate, you know what I mean? Like meditation can be
Yeah.
so hard for people to get into, right? And it can just be a struggle, or even, people have so much egoic resistance to even, you invite someone, oh, come to this sound bath with me, or let's go see this
Yeah.
Reiki
Yeah.
healer. I mean, a lot
Right.
of people are just like, oh, like, I don't even want to do that. Like
Yeah.
they have so much resistance because of what they've been taught, right?
Hmm.
And the thing with psychedelics is like once you're in it, like you don't get to like fight back.
You're like, yeah,
And so
maybe,
that,
maybe not. Maybe
yeah.
you don't get to
And
back
so
out.
that's why when someone goes through like a full-blown ceremonial experience and they actually experience that ego death or similar type sensation and are able to think and comprehend with like a different capacity,
Yeah,
it's like once you experience that, you can't unsee it.
this is true.
And I think that that's really valuable for people on their journey because, again, it goes back to how easy our brain wants to latch on to what it sees and what's right in front of it, right? And if you've had no contact, if you've had no feeling of spiritual connection, if you've had no contact with God or source, outside of a very removed story or something you heard, but then you actually have like the somatic
Mm.
emotional experience of a psychedelic journey where you're like, I experienced unconditional love for the first time, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like once you feel that, then it's like you have a frame of reference to go back to because you've seen it. Now you can't unsee it. And so now your brain is able to like latch onto something that you know to be real that you didn't know to be real before. And so that's expanding your consciousness. That's making you see like, oh, what's right in front of me right now isn't all there is. There's actually other things. And I know that. I have evidence for that because at one point in time, that thing was right in front of me and I felt it and experienced myself. And that's super powerful to help people remove those blocks. And then, of course, a huge thing with psychedelics is the integration. Because again, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Now you're back in your life. And then in my opinion, the quest really begins, which is like, well, how do you find your way back to that without
Mhm.
even having to use the psychedelics or without
Right.
having to rely on these tools that we have, which again, no tools are neutral, right? But anything could be overused or over relied on. And so I feel like that's the magic of psychedelics. And I feel like in contrast, microdosing does a similar thing, but just on a much more subtle level. Like a true microdose, you won't experience any like psychoactive effects. You're not
Yeah,
going to
you don't feel
hallucinate.
it. You don't really feel it
Right. I
necessarily,
mean, you
right?
might feel in your body a little bit like lighter or more energy. And
Hmm.
that's why microdosing often is applied for people that maybe want an alternative to anti-anxiety medication or
Hmm.
antidepressive medication, or even people that are going through you know battles with addiction, that sort of thing. Microdosing can kind of be a substitute in a way for a lot of like the more traditional like pharmaceutical ways of
Right.
like dealing with those things. But microdosing, again, similar experience. It's like softening and loosening up that like ego framework so that your brain can just be more expansive and creative and just let your brain be less controlled
Mm.
by this like very conscious part of ourselves that like desperately wants control all the time, right? And so microdosing is equally powerful. Again, I think it kind of like can play a different role than a full-blown ceremonial experience, but I think they both have their place. And I think microdosing too, especially if it's done very intentionally and like what I do, like I'll microdose for like a month or two at a time, and then I won't for like months, you know.
Interesting.
I try to like keep a journal and just kind of like note like these things came up for me more during this time than not during this time, and kind of just compare it. And that's a good way to just start to get to know yourself better and start to understand what's different about you when that ego is shut down a little bit more. And that can be really interesting and telling information.
Hmm. Yeah. I like how you described it, that it kind of loosens up those really hardwired patterns that just like, and I love the superhighway analogy. It's like,
Yeah,
you know,
that's a good one.
if we have a certain thought pattern that just we've been thinking this thought pattern our whole life, like to create a new neural pathway, it's a lot of effort, right? Like it's very, to me, I know that it can be very, very challenging
Yeah.
to change those deeply embedded patterns. And it sounds like, yeah, well, psychedelics, who's the guy that, Paul Stamets?
Yeah.
And he tells his story, how he used to have a,
Stutter.
yes, thank you. He had a stutter.
Yeah.
I was going to say lisp.
Yeah.
No, it's not a lisp. He had a stutter, right? And he could not, he was
Yeah.
really attracted to this girl and he just could not, didn't even attempt to talk to her because he's like, I got this stutter. I can't do it. And I don't know if it was his first trip. Maybe it was. I think maybe it was. And he had like no idea what he was doing. Definitely took
Yeah.
way too much. Took
Yeah.
way too much. Found himself in a tree in the middle of a freaking rain, like thunderstorm with lightning
Yes.
and thunder, like raining, and he's like tripping out, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love the story because he's just like, oh my God, like I'm gonna die. Like you can imagine, here he is. But then, I don't remember the details of the experience, but what I remember is that after that trip, his stutter was gone.
Yeah.
It was
It's such
gone.
an amazing story.
And it's like, and he was able to go up to that woman and say, hello, my name is
Mm-hmm.
Michael, or whatever. It's like, it's like, oh, wow, it's so, I love it because, and I know you feel the same way. I mean, I understand that some people feel that they have to do pharmaceuticals, but I just know that for many people, it's not a path they want to walk down. Or many people that are on pharmaceuticals and they want to get off. Like, I was just had a conversation with a psychiatrist. Well, that's his whole goal
Mm-hmm.
is to get people off of these medications, and
Yeah.
so, whether it's addiction or medications or all these things, it's like, God created us perfectly. And we're doing these things to ourselves because, for whatever reason, we've created so many veils that just,
Yeah.
don't, we can't really see who we really, really are. And
Exactly.
so things like yoga and psychedelics help us to catch those glimpses of like, oh, yeah, this is who I really am. And yeah, I agree. So what are um what are some of the ways that you work with people?
Yeah. So I work with people in a couple of different ways. I mean, obviously, I teach yoga, but like my main thing is doing the intuitive coaching. That's really what I enjoy. Intuitive coaching, it is a combination of like the way I was trained
Hmm.
in coaching, the kind that I do, is it really is working with like inner archetypes and visualization, inner child work, kind of a combination of these different things to again help peel back the layers and lift the veil a little bit on ourselves and who we truly are. And really it comes down to like shadow work in a lot of ways, because there's so much that most of us have in our subconscious that we're just not even aware of, things that are affecting us, like fears, hopes, desires, traumas, all kinds of things that are like in this background
Hmm.
of our unconscious awareness that are really truly playing into how our lives are unfolding and we're not aware of it. And so the intuitive coaching is really helping people peel back that layer, acknowledge their shadows, see them, love them, integrate them, and then from that, like emerge more whole with a more whole sense of self and who they really are, separate from that like reactive conditioned version of them that they've created to feel safe in the world. And then doing that coaching, I can incorporate, psychedelics into it with people if they like, as like a microdosing protocol, or people can do it without the microdosing. And then I also host ceremonies with people, both individual, and then I'm going to be hosting a couple of group ceremonies actually this spring with a couple of my other colleagues in the psychedelic space, which I'm really excited about, because there's a lot of really powerful work that can be done when not only are you going through such an intense experience, but you're witnessing others and being witnessed in that
Mm.
process.
Wow.
And so those are really the main ways I work with people. I have, I'm a very flexible, flowing person, I guess, in how I create. And so, like I said, I have my trainings and I have kind of like the boxes I put them into. But at the end of the day, my favorite thing to do is really just to work with the client and start to see like where it takes us. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, not every modality is for everyone.
Yeah.
And some people, it really is just starting off with like doing some morning yoga and getting back in their body. And for other people, it's going to be, a full blown psychedelic journey. And that might be where they're at or what they want. And for other people, it's just kind of looks like showing up and talking to me like you talk to a therapist, So it really depends. But that's why, you know, as I started on this journey and as I started to lean into what I sensed my purpose was, I did want to like accumulate a lot of different tools and stuff in my tool belt because I kind of sensed that was important,
Hmm.
to have different ways to relate to different people. And it's been interesting for me too. And I think made me better at what I do, of being able to see where all of these different things that might not really be related and that might come from very different, spiritual backgrounds or geographic regions, like really all are kind of like informing towards the same truths.
Hmm.
Um, and so from that, I can kind of synthesize and like spin my own perception of it
Hmm.
that I use when I interact with people.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm curious, are those retreats up on your website?
Yes, the medicine retreat is up on my website. And then I also have something I just want to mention really quickly that I'm hosting in January. It's just a 2-week group in Telegram app. And it's going to be all about detoxing from shame and like just discussing as a group in like a very low pressure setting, the ways that, shame influences us, whether
Mm.
consciously or not. And
Mhm.
how, again, it's part of that like veiling that we have, like all these layers of ourselves that we hide and suppress and never come to know because there's been these like collective agreements around,
Yeah.
what
What's
should be considered and what
yeah,
shouldn't. Yeah.
what's acceptable?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful, amazing. So awakeningchandra.com, that's where you can
Yes.
learn about that. You're on Facebook. Um, where else? Instagram?
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Substack. So I
Okay.
just started writing on Substack in October. So that's been a whole new thing for me.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining. Please like, share, and subscribe. Um, Chelsea, thank you so much for being our guest and for everything that you shared. Like, really, just I feel it coming from your heart and your yeah, just authenticity and your genuine what's the word I'm looking for? Just, yeah, your dedication to the work that you're doing. And so just want to honor that and celebrate that in you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Ciao, everybody.